Morning. Good afternoon, and welcome to the January meeting of the Federal Communications Commission. Madam Secretary, will you please tell us what we got going today?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to you, and good afternoon, Commissioners. For today's meeting, you will hear 3 items for your consideration. First, you will consider a report and order which modernizes the public inspection file rules by requiring cable and satellite TV operators and broadcast and satellite radio companies to post public inspection files on the FCC's online database. Second, you will consider a notice of proposed rulemaking to strengthen the emergency alert system by promoting participation on the state and local levels, supporting greater testing and awareness of EAS, leveraging technological advances, and bolstering EAS security. Third, you will hear the 2016 Broadband Progress Report examining whether advanced telecommunications capability is being deployed to all Americans in a reasonable and timely fashion. This is your agenda for today. Please note items 5 through 7 listed under the consent agenda in the Commission's January 2016 Sunshine Notice have been adopted by the Commission and deleted from today's agenda. Items 1 through 4 have been removed from the consent agenda and remain under consideration by the Commission. The first item, entitled Expansion of Online Public File Obligations to Cable and Satellite TV Operators and Broadcast and Satellite Radio Licensees, will be presented by the Media Bureau. Mary Beth Murphy, Deputy Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you very much. Madam Secretary. Ms. Murphy, I just want to comment at the outset that this is a great lineup that we have staring at us here, and it's wonderful to see an all-female cast making this guy down here doesn't count, making this presentation. It's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Today, the Media Bureau presents a report and order that expands to cable and satellite TV operators and broadcast and satellite radio licensees the requirement that public and political files be posted to the FCC's online public inspection file database. These changes will further the Commission's effort to modernize its rules to reflect the way Americans obtain information in the Internet age. For decades, broadcasters and other media entities have been required to maintain files to inform the public about their programming, operations, and compliance with the FCC's rules, including information about candidate requests for political advertising time. Since these rules were adopted, however, the way in which Americans obtain information has changed dramatically. The item before you updates the public file rules to reflect these changes while at the same time minimizing the cost and burden of maintaining a public file. Joining me at the table are Martha Heller and Kim Matthews of the Media Bureau's Policy Division, and Kim will present the item.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, we are pleased to present this report and order that continues the Commission's modernization of its public inspection file rules. Until recently, public inspection files were kept in paper or electronic form at a local station, local cable office, or the national headquarters of DBS and satellite radio operators. In 2012, the Commission updated its public inspection file rules by requiring television broadcasters to post their public and political files to a centralized online database hosted by the Commission. Today's order will expand the online public inspection file to include the materials required to be made available to the public by cable, DBS, broadcast radio, and satellite radio entities. Placing this material online will make it significantly more convenient for the public to access information about how these entities are serving their communities and meeting their public interest obligations. It will also permit the public to search the file without requiring assistance from the office staff of the media entity in question, reducing the burden of maintaining the public file. It will either eliminate or substantially reduce the security concerns associated with allowing people into the office to review a paper file. Expansion of the online file to more media is particularly important with respect to improving public access to political files. While broadcast television remains the dominant medium for political advertising, political ads are increasingly appearing on other media, and this trend is likely to continue. The order takes steps to minimize the effort and cost of moving public files online. Those subject to the new rules will be required to upload to the online file only those public file documents that are not already on file with the Commission. In addition, these entities will not be required to upload their existing political files to the online file. Rather, they will be required to upload only new political file content on a going-forward basis. To ease the transition to the online file for broadcast radio stations, the order requires larger commercial stations in larger radio markets to transition to the online file first, and delays for 2 years all online file requirements for all other radio stations. Specifically, commercial radio stations in the top 50 radio markets with 5 or more full-time employees would commence using the online public file after the order becomes effective, while all other radio stations would not be required to commence online filing until March 1, 2018. In addition, the order exempts very small cable systems with fewer than 1,000 subscribers from all online public file requirements because they are already exempt from most public file requirements, including the political file. For small cable systems with between 1,000 and 5,000 subscribers, the order delays for 2 years the requirement that they commence uploading new political file material to the online file. The order permits entities that are temporarily exempt from all or part or all online public file requirements to upload material to the online file voluntarily before the delayed effective date of their online file requirement. In addition, entities that have fully transitioned to the online public file are permitted to cease maintaining a local public file as long as they provide online access to backup political file material via the entity's own website if the FCC's online file database becomes temporarily unavailable. With very limited exceptions, the new rules do not impose new or modified public file obligations. The goal of the order is simply to move the existing public file requirements to an online format. The Media Bureau recommends that the Commission adopt this report and order and requests editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Matthews. Commissioner Clyburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I voted 4 years ago to make public files that were then stored in broadcast television station headquarters available over a Commission-hosted online public file platform, I said that disclosure and transparency inspire confidence, increase the public's trust, and convey good faith. The American people not only want those things, my statement read, they demand them. And that is the basis for my approval of this item. Those expressions for me are just as true today as when I said them 4 years ago, which is why I support the expansion of online public file obligations to include radio broadcasters, cable companies, and satellite radio and television properties. Our experience with the television online file transition has been, in a word, positive. At my request, the television online file migration was evaluated 1 year after the largest stations transitioned, and what we found was that there was no reason to delay the transition for smaller stations. Broadcasters saw the online database as easy to use and reliable, but most importantly, the public has found it incredibly valuable, judging by the almost 12 million visits to the host site since then. With this as a backdrop, the time has come for the remaining media entities to transition their public files online. Radio, cable, and satellite providers will be phasing into the online system in the same manner as we did for television stations. Once again, we will start with the larger stations and systems, giving smaller entities additional time, and if past is prologue, all providers should be at ease. The FCC listened to television broadcasters while it developed a system that is not only user-friendly, it kept the burden of this online shift low. Our IT professionals should be commended for their diligent work in this regard. Today, we're once again simply modernizing the procedures of an existing existing public file requirements by moving from reams of paper and files stored in offices to the internet, which has quickly shown to minimize the burdens on users while ensuring public access to valuable information. But not all of our stations and systems live in an online connected world. So for those properties that remain on the other side of the digital divide, provisions are in place for you to seek a waiver of this rule, giving you additional time to join those of us who take being online for granted. Today's item balances the needs of the public with burdens imposed on the regulated, but it is not accidental that the main beneficiary of this online database is the American public. We rely on the American public as our primary source when it comes to a station's programming, operations, and compliance with the Commission's rules, and they will always be an integral part of our democratic fabric. So if the FCC can be instrumental in giving the public enhanced tools to do so, then we must make it so. I want to especially thank the Media Bureau for their work on this item, particularly Kim Matthews and Mary Beth Murphy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I've just renamed you. Hopefully your husband doesn't mind.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Her parents.
You're a full-service commissioner, is all I can say. You want to do a notary public while you're up here?
I tell you what.
Commissioner Rosenworcel.
That was heavy. We live in the information age. As a result, we demand and expect all sorts of data and intelligence to be available at our fingertips virtually anytime and anywhere. So it strikes me as pretty retrograde that this commission still has on its books a requirement that radio, cable, and satellite providers can keep their public files on paper in dusty file cabinets locked in the information practices of the past. This kind of requirement may have made sense in the Mad Men era, but it makes no sense in the digital age. Today, we update our public file practices so that across the board, those who are required to maintain these records can file them in a commission-hosted, cloud-based online system. This is the right thing to do, this is the modern thing to do, and it has my full support.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Pye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Parsons, Kansas is a world away from San Francisco. And yet, thanks to a service called TuneIn, I was able to listen to my hometown radio station, KLKC 1540 AM, while driving around the Bay Area earlier this month. I happened to visit TuneIn during my trip, and I learned how its app allows you to stream over 100,000 radio stations from across the country and around the world. I've also used KLKC's own app to listen to the station's live stream. Now, I mention all this because it's an example of a broader trend in media, and that is that the amount of content available online is exploding. Last year, the Commission took account of this change when we modified our contest rules to permit broadcasters to disclose the material terms of contests on a publicly available website. And today, we further recognize the digital revolution by requiring cable operators, DBS providers, and broadcast and satellite radio companies to post their public files online. These days, it doesn't make sense for hard copies of these documents to gather dust in forlorn file cabinets. When I've visited radio stations, and I've visited plenty from Birmingham, Alabama to Barrow, Alaska, I've inspected some public files. When I do, I'm usually told that I'm one of the few people who has ever done so. By posting the public file online, we'll make it that much easier for the American people to access that information. No longer will you have to make a special trip to see a public file. You'll now be able to access the file you want, when you want, where you want, and on the internet-connected device that you want. Indeed, with today's decision, one could well say that we are putting the public back into the public file. Now, of course, posting documents online isn't costless. And so throughout this proceeding, I've been particularly concerned about the impact of these new requirements on small cable operators and radio stations. While the FCC doesn't go as far as I would have preferred in this regard, it does cut them some important slack. In particular, we exempt cable systems with fewer than 1,000 subscribers from all online public file requirements. We make clear that the Commission will give serious consideration to waiver requests filed by very small radio stations, that is, stations with fewer than 5 employees. We also made progress in two areas where I otherwise had qualms about posting information online. First, I believe that including the specific location of cable head ends in the online file would raise unnecessary security concerns without any countervailing benefit for the public. I'm therefore pleased that my colleagues agreed with my request to remove such information from the online public file. Second, I have serious reservations about requiring non-commercial educational or NCE stations to include lists of donors supporting specific programs in their online public file. Numerous NCE stations told the Commission that posting those names online would discourage people from making donations. For example, as the National Religious Broadcasters put it, donors may choose to refrain from contributing either because they do not wish to have their privacy violated or because they fear retaliation for supporting non-commercial radio stations that take unpopular or controversial positions, or possibly both. Now, that point about retaliation is one that I take very seriously. Recently, it has become disturbingly common for people with unpopular or controversial positions to be harassed, to be shouted down, and to be intimidated. I do not believe that the FCC should do anything that could enable this kind of bullying. It principally serves to chill public debate and impoverish the marketplace of ideas, and it is unbecoming of a nation that cherishes its First Amendment freedoms. Now, I have no doubt that some will shrug off this concern because it rarely seems to harm people whose views they agree with. But when that kind of deliberate indifference is reinforced by a government mandate, it effectively leaves us with the Orwellian notion that all viewpoints are equal, but some are created more equal than others. And it ignores our nation's history. For example, the landmark 1958 case of NAACP versus Alabama, the U.S. Supreme Court rebuffed the state of Alabama's attempt to require the NAACP to disclose the names and addresses of its Alabama members, an effort that was clearly designed to discourage Alabamians from supporting that civil rights organization. For these reasons, I don't believe that NCE stations should be required to post their donor lists online. Unfortunately, there wasn't majority support for that position. But we were able to agree on a process that allows NCE stations to seek waivers of this requirement if they believe that posting donors' names online would discourage financial support for particular programs. Critically, an NCE station filing such a waiver request would not have to post donor lists to its online file until after the Commission and the courts have finished reviewing that request. This ensures that any NCE station will get full and fair consideration of its position, if it so desires, before donor names are published online. Now, to be sure, this outcome isn't ideal, but we stand in far better stead than we did 3 weeks ago. And since the online public file requirement won't take effect until 2018, it's also my hope that the Commission will revisit this question before it's implemented. In short, I agree with most of this order. And where I don't, we've been able to improve it. For those reasons, I'm voting to approve in part and concur in part. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to the Bureau for its efforts.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner O'Reilly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief and just make a couple points and leave the rest of my statement for the record. But as my colleagues have highlighted, moving the required public inspection files online should benefit regulated entities and the public alike, providing better access to information while eventually reducing the overall cost of compliance. I've been an advocate of using the power of the Internet in many ways to make life a little easier for all parties who want to participate in commission proceedings, and this order should ultimately help achieve that goal. For some of our regulatees, placing all of their public files online will not only reduce cost, it will also enhance the security of their facilities, since they will no longer need to maintain a local, physically accessible public file. A few months ago, I wrote about the potential impact of this major security loophole, specifically on broadcasters. Unlike cable and satellite operators, commercial broadcast licensees will not have the immediate option of transitioning to an online-only public file due to the Commission's rule pertaining to the correspondence file that arguably cannot be made available online for privacy reasons. I very much appreciate the Chairman's attention to this important issue and commitment to move forward on a proposal to eliminate the correspondence file requirements so that broadcasters, too, can have an online-only option for public file requirements. I also appreciate his willingness to address a similar security issue for cable head-end locations. I do join my colleague, Commissioner Pai, in his concerns about the NCE station donors and the privacy and security risks, and hope that the waiver process is beneficial going forward. And with that, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Reilly. I have a statement for the record, and my only statement will be to say thank you to Mary Beth and Kim and Martha for your good work. I think it's clear from the discussion up here that there was a lot of back and forth, that there was a lot of give and take, and that the product is stronger as a result. So thank you to all of you. And with that, I will call for the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The item is adopted. The request for editorial privileges is granted with the exception noted. Madam Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, the next item on your agenda will be presented by the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau. It is entitled Amendment of Part 11 of the Commission's Rules regarding the Emergency Alert System and Wireless Emergency Alerts.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good morning, Chairman Wheeler.
You all set? Thank you, Admiral.
And Commissioners. Today we present a notice to propose rulemaking designed to strengthen the Emergency Alert System, the national public warning service by which broadcasters, cable television providers, and other participants deliver emergency information in times of crisis. The proposals are intended to enhance community preparedness by facilitating better state and local Emergency Alert System, or EAS, planning and operations by improving testing and training, leveraging technological advances, and enhancing EAS security. The EAS has been the nation's survivable, large-scale method for delivering life-saving alerts for almost half a century. EAS use in emergencies like tornadoes, floods, and child abductions illustrate the tremendous value derived from this backbone platform for public alert and warning. Advances in technology, however, are changing the landscape of emergency alerting, presenting new threats to the system, but also new opportunities to further improve the EAS role in saving lives and mitigating damage from disasters, while ensuring the system remains ready should the President ever need to use it. The item also proposes initiatives expected to encourage state and local innovation to better use the system to meet the needs of their communities when disaster strikes. There are some exciting examples here and abroad where the growing connectedness of communities has led to an increasingly effective use of social media-derived technologies for dissemination and targeted crowdsourced feedback to rapidly assess the scope of an emergency, efficiently triage victim needs, and organize optimal deployment of limited emergency resources. The item references a particularly innovating example in Indonesia using existing systems to improve community response to flooding. The item seeks comment on the utility of applying readily available advanced information technologies to the existing EAS and WIA platforms to improve both one-to-many dissemination of warning and facilitate the efficient many-back-to-one targeted feedback to emergency operations centers. With me today from the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau are Nicole McGinnis, Associate Bureau Chief, Greg Cook, Associate Chief of the Bureau's Policy and Licensing Division, and James Wiley, Attorney Advisor in that division. Also Stephen Carpenter from our Cybersecurity, Communications, and Reliability Division. I also want to thank Lisa Folks, Deputy Bureau Chief, and the other bureaus and offices who contributed to the item. We also appreciate the continued engagement by public safety and industry stakeholders, as well as our sister agencies, FEMA and NOAA. Greg will now present the item.
Thank you, Admiral Simpson. Good afternoon, Chairman Wheeler and Commissioners. As Admiral Simpson noted, this notice proposes rules to improve emergency alerting and support community preparedness. First, our current rules require states to file their EAS plans with the Commission, but these plans, which contain guidelines describing how each state activates the EAS and disseminates alerts, are still filed on paper. The notice proposes to streamline and improve the process through the use of an online system and template, along with other changes designed to make planning both administratively easier and more productive. This streamlined system will allow states to file plans that fully detail their strategies for delivering life-saving alerts and will provide the Commission with a useful tool to gauge the effectiveness of each state's ability to deliver alerts and warnings to their citizens. Second, the notice proposes to evolve EAS testing from a purely technical event into one that would support voluntary integration with community public safety exercises. The item proposes authorizing live code tests and public service announcements that use the familiar EAS sounds. The notice also seeks comment on how best to ensure that community-based exercises address the needs of all community members, including individuals with limited English proficiency and individuals with disabilities. Third, the notice seeks comment on the impact of advancement in technology on EAS. Specifically, the notice seeks comment on whether the Commission needs to retain its current forced tuning and selective override provisions, which were designed to help cable providers efficiently transmit alerts by shifting viewers to a single EAS channel. The notice also seeks comment on the extent to which consumers expect to receive EAS over services outside of traditional broadcast or pay TV, and what technical, policy, or jurisdictional issues would need to be addressed. The item also seeks comment on the potential of technological advancements to further improve accessibility. With respect to alerting security, the notice proposes to require EAS participants to certify performance of industry-recommended security best practices. The notice further proposes to require reporting for false alerts and lockouts and to ensure that all alerts are properly authenticated and validated to protect against malicious or accidental misuse of this national security resource. Finally, the notice seeks comment on whether adoption of a software-defined networking approach to the EAS architecture would help make the EAS more secure and more resilient. The Bureau recommends adoption of the item and requests editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Greg, you did a great job. I just want to note that we recognize James is here for the second time, which means that because it's his second appearance, the audience is smaller than it was last.
I'm merely in his shadow.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the question is, are they watching online? But
I guarantee you that they are watching the live stream at this moment and smiling.
Good for them. Commissioner Clyburn.
That's great. The FCC's role in strengthening our nation's public alert and warning systems barely registers a blip over the news and public awareness radar screen. But this obligation is one of this agency's most important. I strongly support today's notice of proposed rulemaking, even in the absence of fanfare or praise, because it takes a comprehensive approach to improving those critical systems that warn citizens of imminent threats to life and property. During my tenure at the FCC, we have focused on the three services that the federal government regulates or manages: the Emergency Alert System, or EAS, wireless emergency alerts, and the Integrated Public Alert Warning System. But today's item properly recognizes that advanced commercial technologies, such as social media platforms, can also play important roles in keeping citizens safe. These technologies enable services such as crowdsourced data, multilingual accessibility, and multimedia capability, which may offer public safety agencies at all levels new ways to warn our citizens when they are at their most vulnerable, as well as enable us to assess the public's response to new and evolving approaches. The item acknowledges that some social media platforms are already improving the accessibility of emergency messages by offering users the ability to translate alerts from English into more than 40 languages. And yes, we should encourage emergency managers at the federal, state, and local levels to integrate those proven, most advanced commercial technologies into their matrices so that no member of our society is left more at risk in time of crisis. Another important aspect of this notice is that it proposes several thoughtful approaches in addressing significant vulnerabilities in the nation's EAS infrastructure. Over the past several years, there have been a number of security breaches where hackers gain access to emergency alert security facilities and actually sent out fraudulent or false alerts. One such breach is one too many. The Commission has worked hard, mostly behind the scenes, to strengthen security protocols by encouraging parties to voluntarily adopt industry best practices. But now is the time for us to consider instituting more uniform, accurate, and consistent measures when it comes to local, state, and national EAS plans. The notice recommends common sense measures such as requiring the filing of annual certifications, which would affirm that entities are performing those best practices recommended by our CISRIC Advisory Committee, mandating the reporting of false alerts, as well as ensuring that jurisdictions are taking the necessary steps to ensure that those alerts are originated by authorized sources. I hope all relevant stakeholders will carefully consider these proposals, weigh in, and provide details on any alternative methods that can more effectively help us meet our national safety as well as local, state, and national security goals. And I commend Chairman Wheeler for his leadership and thank Admiral Simpson and the Public Safety Bureau for putting forth proposals that seek to strike the appropriate balance between cost, interoperability, and public safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Rosenworcel.
20 years ago this month, a child in Arlington, Texas, was snatched by a stranger while riding her bike with her younger sibling. This is a horror no parent should ever know. It's one I can't even begin to imagine. But that tragic event led to the creation of the Amber Alert program. This program is a nationwide partnership that combines the resources of law enforcement officials, broadcasters, and wireless providers. Since its inception, it has been credited with saving nearly 800 missing or abducted children from all across the country. Now, the Amber Alert program is not the focus of our rulemaking today, but it strikes me as a powerful demonstration of the power of emergency alerts. There are no shortage of other examples. Take early last year in Sand Spring, Oklahoma, when the alert system prompted the director of a school to lead 60 children and adults into the basement. While 100-mile-per-hour winds tore apart the building, leading to the collapse of the roof, no one was injured because they got the information they needed to stay safe. Last week, in Woodbridge, New Jersey, I toured an area damaged by Hurricane Sandy, another instance when emergency alerts helped limit inconceivable damage from Mother Nature's wrath. And closer to home, last weekend the Mid-Atlantic was blanketed with snow. And broadcasting and emergency alerts played a formidable role in helping us safely ride out the storm. So emergency alerts can do great things. But great programs do not thrive without continuous review and care. The Emergency Alert Program deserves this consideration, and it deserves it now. It needs to be modernized. And thanks to our Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, this rulemaking starts the process to do just that. It proposes a streamlined online filing process for state emergency alert plans. It proposes expanded testing under real-life conditions. And it asks about changing technology and also seeks to improve the security of the emergency alert system and protect essential infrastructure from attack. So thank you. This has my unconditional support.
Thank you, Commissioner Rosenworcel. Commissioner Pye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. President Harry S. Truman established our nation's first emergency broadcast system. He gave it a name that, in hindsight, sounds like it was plucked from that classic television show, Get Smart. It was called CONELRAD, which stood for Control of Electromagnetic Radiation. And that early system directed Americans to tune their radios to 640 or 1240 on the AM radio dial so that the president could address the nation in the event of an attack. Its name has changed a few times over the years, and its capabilities have expanded. But the Emergency Alert System, or EAS, still serves the basic and important purpose of providing the American public with timely access to emergency information. This past year alone, Our federal, state, and local partners sent out over 25,000 alerts in communities across the country, including severe weather alerts, missing child notifications, and other emergency information. So I'm pleased that this notice of proposed rulemaking will explore ways that we can strengthen and improve our alerting system. I'm particularly pleased that the notice now includes a section that asks some fundamental questions about the structure of our alerting system. Right now, EAS messages are transmitted in one of two ways, either through the traditional broadcast-based EAS protocol or through a newer internet-based protocol. Does it make sense to maintain these two approaches for redundancy or other purposes? Or should we switch to a single distribution method? We also seek comment more broadly on whether our alerting system is appropriately tailored to today's communications landscape. Do we need to rethink the basic structure of our system in light of the technological advances? Or is the current system flexible enough to continue to serve as our alerting platform going forward? Vital questions all, and I'm glad that we're now asking them. As important as what is in the document is what is not. The notice no longer seeks comment on imposing regulations on over-the-top or OTT providers in a way that would have tilted the regulatory playing field against a subset of those providers. Given the nascent, competitive, and dynamic OTT market, I thought it was important to move forward in a more balanced manner, one that respected the innovation and entrepreneurship we see in that space. And so I appreciate the compromise struck on this point. As we modernize the system, we must be mindful of how our regulations might impact the market for IP-based offerings. Last but certainly not least, I want to thank the staff of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, including Admiral Simpson, Gregory Cook, Nikki McGinnis, Lisa Folks, Zenji Nakazawa, and of course the dapper James Wiley for all of their hard work on this item. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Pye. Commissioner O'Reilly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I start by congratulating and thanks are due to be extended to local broadcasters, the cable providers, and those on the internet who provided information to Washington, D.C. folks during the recent snowstorm. Very helpful, and I extend my thanks as well. But Americans have abundant access to emergency information outside of the emergency alert system. Although EAS has its place, we must remember that the underlying purpose of the Commission's rule is to deliver presidential emergency alerts, a protocol that has, in fact, never, ever been activated. Not only must we ensure that we do not place unnecessary burdens on states and other EAS participants, but we also need to ensure that the alerts are reliable and not so intrusive or testing so pervasive that people start ignoring them. As I've often said, the Commission must periodically review its regulations to ensure that they are needed and to modify or update them as necessary. And EAS is no different. Therefore, I'm generally supportive of proceeding to reevaluate our rules. I am highly skeptical, however, about some of the issues raised if they were to be part of any final item. For instance, the ideas about obtaining information on the use of social media and highway signs as part of state emergency plans, some of the testing procedures and outreach measures, and machine translation technologies for accessibility could result in unnecessarily burdensome rules. I'm also concerned that the portion of the order on software-defined EAS networks could lead to duplicative EAS infrastructures and technology mandates. Let's hope the record adequately addresses all of these issues to ensure that the correct balance is achieved and costs are minimized. Our main goal must be an EAS system that works, not a half-baked mandate for inclusion in every communication mechanism. However, I'm most disturbed about those portions of the item that seek or could be used to capture the internet in our EAS rules. For instance, there are questions about whether our requirements should be expanded beyond channels that carry programming, which could possibly capture channels carrying interactive games, the internet, and internet access. Further, we seek comment on expanding alerts to emerging video technology, which could ultimately be used to impose EAS requirements on over-the-top providers, such as MVPD and broadcaster mobile applications, Netflix, Hulu, and others. Had the public seen the first version of this item, they would likely be outraged on how directly it attempted to capture certain OTT services in the morass. Making the language vaguer does not hide its true intentions. Beyond the harmful policy direction, we do have limited statutory authority to regulate the Internet and edge providers, and I will not be supportive of any efforts to do so. The item also questions whether WIA alerts should be expanded to tablets capable of connecting to a wireless provider's network. Many of these lines of inquiry could lead to regulating some services and devices, but not others, opening the door to a mess of regulatory parity problems. Although the Commission asserts that it is just seeking information on these new technology issues, this is a facade. We have been down this road before. Using the guise of an advisory committee, industry best practices have turned into Commission mandates before our very eyes. We actually see this approach in this very item. This item takes the security measures that are part of CISRC's best practices and makes them mandatory by requiring certifications of compliance from EAS participants. It highlights the broken advisory committee process identified long ago, a problem that is likely to be repeated if the Commission reestablishes the National Advisory Committee with expanded membership and responsibilities. Finally, the statutory authority and cost-benefit discussions, once again, are sorely lacking. Additionally, I do not agree with the Commission's use of the Section 706 of the Communications Act, which provides the President the authority during times of war to direct such communications as, in his judgment, may be essential to the national defense and security, as authority for all the ideas in this notice. If so, let me see the communications between the White House and the Commission advocating for these changes. I'm sure the President must have been in favor of the changes we're seeking. But if that's not the case, then so be it. For these reasons, I must dissent in part. I do thank the Chairman's office and the Commission staff for working through some issues and taking very few of my suggestions. However, the edits did not go far enough. Thank you.
Commissioner. I have also a statement for the record that I'll submit for the record. You know, we're talking about safety. Safety, our most important assignment in this agency. It would be a tragedy beyond comprehension to wake up late to how technology is changing the way in which people receive information. Because as Commissioner Pai walked us down memory lane, I actually remember being able to tune to those 2 points on the dial. They were actually marked with a little triangle on the dial, so you would know this is where you want to go to get these alerts. Things have changed a bit since then, and when 63% of the American people get their information from Facebook and Twitter, we ought to be asking ourselves, hey, inside our authority, are we making sure that we are keeping up? And that's what this item does. So it has my wholehearted support, and I will call for the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The requests for editorial privileges are granted, with the exception noted. Madam Secretary.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, last on your agenda today, the 2016 Broadband Progress Report will be presented by the Wireline Competition Bureau and the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau. Matt Del Nero, Chief of the Wireline Competition Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you.
Mr. Del Nero.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I'm pleased to present to you a report fulfilling an annual mandate under Section 706 of the Telecommunications Act of 1996. That is, the report assesses whether advanced telecommunications capability is available to all Americans and also whether that capability is being deployed in a reasonable and timely fashion. The report before you finds that while the nation has made significant progress in broadband deployment is not reasonable and timely, given that a substantial digital divide persists along multiple fronts, as my colleague Zach Ross will discuss shortly. This report was a joint effort of the Wireline Competition and Wireless Telecommunications Bureaus, along with substantial collaboration and assistance from the International Bureau on the subject of satellite-delivered broadband. That is reflected in the composition of the table here. With me at the table is Roger Sherman, Chief of the Wireless Bureau, who tells me he's sitting up very straight because he hurt his back yesterday lifting snow. Also with me are Vicki Robinson and Zach Ross of the Wireline Bureau, Paroma Sanyal and Michael Jansen of the Wireless Bureau, and Neshe Gwendelsberger of the International Bureau. Within our bureaus and elsewhere in the Commission, many more people contributed to the analysis and writing for this report, and they include, if you'll indulge me, within the Wireline Bureau, Trent Harcrater, Steve Rosenberg, Dan Kahn, Heather Hendrickson, John Reel, and Pam Magna. From the Wireless Bureau, Jim Schlichting, Joel Taubenblatt, William Beckwith, and Patrick Sun. And from the International Bureau, of course, Mendel De La Torre, as well as Denise Coca, Rich Lerner, and Jose Albuquerque. And I'd also like to thank Paul LaFontaine from the Office of Strategic Planning and Policy Analysis. This list and others I might have inadvertently omitted give you an idea of the hard work that staff has put into the item before you, including with respect to analysis of data as well as legal, economic, and policy matters. And with that, I will turn to my colleague, Zach Ross, who will present the item.
Thank you, Matt. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Pursuant to the Commission's statutory responsibilities, the report before you finds that, despite meaningful progress, advanced telecommunications capability is not being deployed to all Americans in a reasonable and timely fashion. This finding is driven by several factors. Despite an increase in the number of Americans that are able to obtain advanced telecommunications capability, the report finds that approximately 34 million Americans, representing 10% of the population, continue to lack access to fixed broadband at or above the Commission's 25 megabits per second download, 3 megabits per second upload speed benchmark, or 25.3 for short. More troublingly, there continues to be a significant rural-urban disparity in access to advanced telecommunications capability. The report finds, for example, that Americans living in rural areas and on tribal lands are approximately 10 times more likely than those in urban areas to lack access to 25.3 services. This disparity presents a significant barrier to participation in the 21st century economy by rural and tribal communities, including small businesses operating in these areas. Congress also directs the Commission to evaluate the availability of advanced telecommunications capability to schools and classrooms, and here too, the report finds cause for concern. Recent third-party analysis of data collected from the E-rate program shows that an increasing number of schools have high-speed connections, but that 41% of schools have not yet met the Commission's short-term goal of 100 megabits per second per 1,000 users, and an even higher percentage have not met the Commission's long-term goal of 1 gigabit per second per 1,000 users. In short, although gains are being made, the report before you for consideration concludes that this progress is not occurring broadly enough or quickly enough to satisfy the statutory objective. The report also takes steps to ensure that the Commission's understanding of advanced telecommunications capability continues to accurately reflect the needs of American consumers. To this end, the report finds that today, advanced telecommunications capability requires access to both fixed and mobile broadband service. The report makes this finding in recognition of the simple fact that, as they currently exist, fixed and mobile broadband are both critically important services that provide different and complementary capabilities. Unmoored from a fixed location, mobile broadband empowers consumers to access the internet and web-based applications while on the go, ensuring that the myriad benefits of internet access follow consumers throughout the day. Fixed broadband, on the other hand, has the potential to provide consumers with a high-speed, high-capacity internet connection, and is more suitable for streaming high-definition video, transmitting large files, and other bandwidth-intensive activities. The report therefore finds that, today, fixed and mobile broadband are not adequate substitutes. On the contrary, both services provide consumers with essential components of advanced telecommunications capability. However, this report does not set a specific speed benchmark for mobile broadband service, and as such, does not rely on the deployment of mobile broadband in making its finding. Nor does the report adopt any other additional benchmarks for other performance metrics, such as latency or service consistency. Instead, the report notes that the Commission intends to continue to develop a more fulsome record regarding these issues. Additionally, the report determines that the Commission should apply the same speed benchmark to both fixed terrestrial and fixed satellite broadband services, while observing significant differences involving technical capabilities and adoption patterns between fixed terrestrial and fixed satellite services. Because no satellite service meets our 25.3 speed benchmark as of the date of reporting, the report need not and does not decide the implications of any technical or economic distinctions between fixed terrestrial and fixed satellite services for the purposes of our inquiry. The report recognizes and celebrates the meaningful progress that has been made by both private and public sector initiatives to increase deployment of advanced telecommunications capability. It concludes, however, that much work remains to be done. The report therefore suggests that the Commission will continue its work to expand access to advanced telecommunications capability by identifying and helping to remove obstacles to broadband deployment, competition, and adoption. The Bureaus recommend adoption of this item and request editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Commissioner Clyburn.
Thank you. I am pleased that this year's Broadband Progress Report recognizes that both mobile and fixed broadband are needed to meet the ever-growing demands of today's always-on consuming society. The two services complement each other so seamlessly that we often forget how much we rely on each. Indeed, I would challenge anyone fortunate enough to subscribe to both services to forego either for a week and see how challenging it is to keep up with the daily demands of work, school, home, health, commerce, sanity, well, just about everything. Now, there is a lot of good contained in this report. It shows impressive strides towards meeting our goal of ensuring that all Americans have access to advanced telecommunications capability. I am proud to have been a part of many of the Landmark Commission decisions that helped to close these gaps, including the FCC's 2011 landmark reform of the Universal Service Program to support broadband deployment. What is also clear, however, is that there is more work left to do, and we cannot afford to declare victory until every corner of this nation has fixed and mobile broadband-capable networks. There are two areas in particular where I believe additional Commission action is needed so that we are able to once and for all close some chronic technology divides. First, the Commission needs to adopt a permanent mobility fund, as envisioned by the unanimous FCC decision in the 2011 Universal Service Fund Intercarrier Compensation for Transformation Order, say that 3 times. The report's finding that mobile is necessary for advanced telecommunications capability heightens the need to move swiftly on the mobility fund so we can close any remaining gaps in mobile broadband coverage. While I applaud the levels of private sector investment, there are places that still lack coverage and other areas that only have service because of the ongoing support from the Federal Universal Service Fund. A permanent mobility fund should be expressly targeted, however, to reach these areas. And existing legacy support for wireless providers is not necessarily the most efficient use of universal service. Indeed, the Commission estimated back in 2014 that wireless providers continue to receive about $590 million annually in legacy support. But currently, there is no obligation that this support be used to deploy broadband or to connect those unserved areas. This must change. Second, we need to ensure that once deployed, the service is actually affordable. It is crystal clear that too many of our citizens, particularly those who are low income, many with disabilities, and those living in rural and on tribal lands, remain on the wrong side of the connectivity divide. In many of these places, ensuring that service is affordable for consumers who are struggling remains a challenge. The Commission sought comment on modernizing the Lifeline program last year, and I am hopeful that we will move quickly to ensure that broadband is a part of that matrix. I want to also thank the combined forces of the bureaus for their work, the chairman and his staff for their willingness. He's so powerful that he's plural. His staff for their willingness to accommodate my office's edits, and I look forward to working with my colleagues to adopt a permanent mobility fund and finalize Lifeline reform with dispatch. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Clyburn. Commissioner Rosenworcel.
I believe the future belongs to the connected. That's because a broadband connection is more than a technology. It's a platform for opportunity. No matter who you are or where you live in this country, you need access to modern communications to have a fair shot at 21st century success. That's a fact. There are also a lot of other facts in today's report, which is our most comprehensive picture of where we stand in bringing broadband to all Americans. Much of the news is good. This is due in no small measure to the enormous investment that communications providers are making to deploy broadband all across the country. At the same time, this report demonstrates that we have communities that lack the connectivity they need today and require for the future. This is especially true in rural and tribal areas. So we have work to do. I also believe the future belongs to the bold. Enough with dreaming small. It's time to dream big. This is the country that put a man on the moon. We invented the internet. We can do audacious things if we set big goals. So I believe we need big broadband goals. I am pleased that 6 years ago, the Commission had the foresight to change our downstream broadband speed threshold from 200 kilobits to 4 megabits. And I'm glad that last year we upped the ante and changed the threshold to 25 megabits. I support the continued use of this standard today, but I think we need to go big and be bold. I think our new threshold should be 100 megabits, and gigabit speed should be in our sights. I believe anything short of goals like this shortchanges our children, our future, and our digital economy. Now, this may not be easy, but I think we can do it. That's because the history of innovation is brimming with examples of the great depths of American know-how. It's time to put that know-how to work and bring really big broadband everywhere.
Hear, hear. Commissioner Pai.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congress created the FCC to make available, so far as possible, to all the people of the United States a rapid, efficient, nationwide, and worldwide wire and radio communications service. In the Telecommunications Act of 1996, Congress reiterated that charge, requiring the FCC to encourage the deployment of advanced telecommunications capability, or broadband, to all Americans, and to take immediate action to accelerate deployment if the country falls behind. In other words, Section 706 is focused on bringing high-speed internet access to places where a business case for deployment doesn't already exist. It's all about rural America. Now, in the first broadband deployment report of the Obama administration, the FCC declared that broadband was not being deployed to all Americans in a reasonable and timely fashion, finding that 14 to 24 million Americans could not access it. As required by federal law, the Commission vowed immediate action to accelerate deployment. The Commission has since repeated that vow again and again and again. Today, the agency declares once more that broadband is still not being deployed to all Americans in a reasonable and timely fashion. It finds that, to quote the report, approximately 34 million Americans lack service, nearly the population of Canada. That's at least 10 million more Americans than were being left behind at the beginning of this administration. These figures confirm that this administration's policies to encourage and accelerate broadband deployment over the last 7 years just haven't worked. The digital divide between rural and urban America hasn't been closed. In fact, it's been widened. And so the FCC today gives this administration a failing grade. Now, you might think that for all the money this administration has spent, there would be real progress. But the FCC doesn't think so. And in many ways, I agree. I agree that it's a failure to spend $28.1 billion on the FCC's high-cost program since 2009, and yet still find today a stark contrast in service between urban and rural America. I agree that it's a failure to spend $8.2 billion on a so-called stimulus spending plan that favors overbuilding and all too often politically connected cronyism, and consequently leaves Americans who live in rural areas 10 times more likely to be unserved than their urban counterparts. I agree that it's a failure to agree to commit $9.4 billion through the Connect America Fund and $354 million more through the Mobility Fund to deploy services that don't meet the FCC's 25 megabit per second standard for broadband. After these funds go out the door, we'll still have to say then what we say today. Americans living in rural areas and tribal lands disproportionately lack access. I agree that it's a failure that the FCC has spent $10.9 billion in the Lifeline program and has doubled the size of that program, yet it hasn't made a dent in telephone adoption, the supposed purpose of all those subsidies. I agree that it's a failure that the FCC has spent $14.6 billion on the E-rate program, yet it still finds today that 91% of schools don't meet our own long-run connectivity target, and 41% of schools don't even meet the short-term target. And I agree that it's a failure that the FCC has spent a record $838 million just administering the Universal Service Fund, yet it still can't say that the fund is administered without substantial waste, fraud, and abuse. In short, American taxpayers aren't getting the bang that they deserve for their hard-earned bucks. And the FCC is living up to Ralph Waldo Emerson's dictum that money often costs too much. And one problem has been the Commission's inconsistent approach to supporting broadband deployment in rural America. For what does it say when the FCC has to reconsider its historic Universal Service Transformation Order 7 separate times? What does it say when the agency decides first to adopt benchmarks for rural capital and operating expenses, then to rework them, then to eliminate them, and finally to resurrect them? They're now called specific budgets. What does it say when the U.S. Department of Agriculture feels compelled to tell the FCC that the regulatory uncertainty it's created is devastating rural broadband deployment? That inconsistency extends to the Commission's inability to meet its own deadlines. The Connect America Fund's second phase was supposed to start in 2013, not late 2015. The Commission promised to adopt a competitive bidding mechanism for that phase by December 2012, but we still don't have one. The Mobility Fund's second phase was due 4 years ago, but it's been completely immobile. The Remote Areas Fund hasn't commenced and is remote indeed. And last year, every member of this commission promised Chairman John Thune of the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation that we would adopt a standalone broadband mechanism before 2015 was over. I put my plan on the table last June. It's now 2016, and there is no plan. There is no sign of any plan. There is no plan of any sign, but there is talk. Now, what's worse, the Commission has actively worked to make broadband deployment more difficult. The agency has required carriers to seek government permission before discontinuing almost every network feature, no matter how little used or old-fashioned. It has dragged out the copper retirement process. It has suspended the Clinton-era deregulatory framework for enterprise broadband services, and appears on track for full-scale rate regulation of low-bandwidth services later this year. And it's raised the cost of stringing fiber along poles, only to reverse that decision 6 months later. In short, the Commission has purposely ignored the iron rule that every dollar wasted maintaining the last century's fading technology is by definition a dollar that cannot go towards next-generation networks. And so communities that offer the lowest profit margins, inhabited by low-income Americans, rural Americans, tribal members, and others, must wait that much longer for digital opportunity. Indeed, the administration has overseen the first ever reduction in year-over-year investment by major broadband providers that happened outside a recession. And it occurred in the months following the FCC's rubber stamp of President Obama's plan to regulate the internet. Countless small broadband providers have also reduced investment in the communities they serve because of the FCC's decision to treat the internet like a 19th century railroad or a 20th century water company. As one small wireless provider testified to Congress earlier this month, before the Title II order was adopted, it was our intention to triple our customer base and to cover a 3-county area. However, we have pulled back on those plans, scaling back our deployment to 3 smaller communities that abut our existing network. This administration has also overseen the first ever decline in home broadband adoption since the advent of the commercial internet. According to the Pew Research Center, home broadband adoption seems to have plateaued, with almost 9.7 million Americans having given up their home broadband connections between 2013 and 2015. Now that means over the last 6 years, only 4% of Americans have decided to adopt broadband at home. Compare that with the 57% of Americans that signed up for broadband during the last administration, a yearly average of 7%, or almost twice the adoption growth during this entire administration. Indeed, as the National Broadband Plan found at the dawn of this administration, and I quote, fueled primarily by private sector investment and innovation, the American broadband ecosystem has evolved rapidly. The number of Americans who have broadband at home has grown from 8 million in 2000 to nearly 200 million last year in 2009. It's unfortunate that this incredible pace of progress fizzled thereafter. And so we come to the fundamental question: has the Section 706 test been met? Perhaps surprisingly to some, including myself, I agree with the majority's end result. After 7 years, $63.6 billion spent, and plenty of rhetoric, this administration's policies have failed to deliver advanced telecommunications capability, or broadband, to the American people in a reasonable and timely fashion. The standard set forth by Congress is not being met. Rural America is being left behind. Now, as expected, this Commission's answer to the disappointing news is yet another vow of immediate action to accelerate deployment. After far too many years, far too many chances, and far too many broken promises, we have learned that the past is prologue. What our country needs is a real broadband deployment agenda, a proactive, concrete, bipartisan, and dedicated effort to deliver digital opportunity to every American who wants it. Among other things, that means returning to the bipartisan consensus that the internet should be unfettered by federal or state regulation, so that entrepreneurs within the network and on the edge can innovate without permission. That means embracing the IP transition and letting carriers sunset the increasingly obsolete public switch telephone network and start deploying next-generation technologies like fiber. That means modernizing our rate of return policies so that rural residents can have the same choice for standalone broadband typically found in cities. That means creating a roadmap for state and local governments so that every company that wants to deploy fiber, from Google Fiber to RG Fiber in Kansas, doesn't have to cut through regulatory thickets every single time in every single location. That means reducing the red tape for deploying wireless infrastructure on federal lands, where approval currently takes twice as long as on private lands, disproportionately hurting rural and tribal wireless customers. That means reopening the spectrum pipeline to get more of the airways out of the federal government's hands and into the commercial marketplace. That means rejuvenating the 5 gigahertz proceeding so that wireless broadband providers, entrepreneurs, and consumers nationwide can put another 195 megahertz of spectrum to unlicensed use. That means teeing up 12,500 megahertz of spectrum in frequencies above 24 gigahertz to allow the United States to be a leader in developing 5G technologies. And that means actually eliminating other regulatory barriers to infrastructure investment, such as high pole attachment rates, so that companies can deploy the small cells, the towers, the fiber, and the new services that consumers are demanding. In short, that means promoting competition. That means getting rid of outdated rules and regulatory uncertainty. And that means giving everyone, large companies and small, entrepreneurs and consumers, the confidence that the government will no longer stand as the gatekeeper when it comes to broadband and the services and applications that depend on it. To bring the bounty of broadband to all in our nation who want it, our country needs to choose a different path. As the National Broadband Plan put it half a decade ago, it is time again to reduce talk to practical results. I agree, and that is why I believe it is time for a new beginning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner O'Reilly.
Well, I agree with a lot of the comments of my colleague, but I have a different perspective on the matter. Never let it be said that we are always on the same page. I strongly oppose the notion that broadband is not being deployed in a reasonable and timely fashion as outlined in the law, regardless of whether the standard is 25.3, 10.1, or some other combination of technologies and metrics designed to abuse Section 706 and generate regulation. The report continues to show steady progress in connecting unserved Americans. In fact, even at the artificially high and prematurely adopted 25.3 standard, called table stakes by some, the number of unserved Americans has dropped from approximately 55 million to approximately 34 million Americans in just 1 year. The report even concludes that the data are notably better than last year. But apparently no amount of progress will ever be good enough for a commission that is bent on regulating broadband at any cost. Indeed, the fact that so much progress has been made puts the FCC in an awkward spot. Last January, the commission expressed concern that the number of unserved Americans had dropped by only 3 percentage points. Given that it is also dropped by another 7, the FCC had to sound a new alarm. Now the Commission is not satisfied that the number of unserved Americans is nearly the population of Canada, as if that's some useful measurement of broadband deployment in the United States. If the number drops to 24 million next year, will we be reminded that that is the population of Australia? The mock outrage and phony comparisons only serve to highlight that the actual data in the report doesn't matter and politically driven findings are a sham. To divert attention from the substantial progress being made on fixed broadband, the report concludes a lengthy discussion on mobile broadband. As I predicted, the Commission now finds that the availability of advanced telecommunication capability requires both fixed and mobile service. The idea that we would need to see close to 100% availability of each service in order to reach a positive finding is ludicrous. This siloed way of thinking is outdated and simply does not comport with usage trends. The report is quite certain that fixed and mobile broadbands aren't substitutes, which is completely erroneous conclusion given that it hasn't even defined mobile broadband service yet. But it also runs completely counter to the generational preferences and views on substantiability noted in this very report. This is just another avenue to preordain next year's negative finding. In addition, I have serious concerns with the analysts regarding broadband deployment to schools. The connectivity goals established for the E-rate program were just that, goals. They were not intended to be used as benchmarks to be measured and acted on here. I've already heard reports that schools are making purchasing decisions based on these goals, driving up demand on the consumer-supported Universal Service Fund, regardless of whether their actual usage warrants purchasing additional capability or capacity. By pretending the E-rate goals are benchmarks as done here, the Commission gives schools a further push to overspend, wasting scarce universal service dollars without actually helping the children. I also continue to object to the inclusion of privacy and security as barriers to deployment. The Commission has no authority to regulate in these areas and should not be examining them here. I remain concerned that this line of thinking ultimately could result in the FCC creating duplicative and potentially conflicting burdens on broadband providers, leading to cost increases for consumers. In sum, the task before us is to consider whether deployment in the United States is reasonable and timely, and the objective, empirical answer to that is a resounding yes. In fact, it is more than reasonable considering the unnecessary burdens that the Commission has continued to heap upon broadband providers in the meantime. Well, there's more work to be done, particularly in the rural and remote areas of the country that I've been spending a great deal of time on. I do not agree with the analysis or negative finding, and I must dissent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Reilly. The facts speak for themselves. One of those facts, Commissioner O'Reilly, I want to recognize what you just said, that you have been spending an inordinate amount of time trying to address the rural issue, and I believe doing so creatively through compromise and strategic thinking, which is, I think, our responsibility, all of us. Congress has mandated this report, and we're now set to approve that report. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
The ayes carry. The item is adopted. The request for editorial privileges is granted with the objection noted. Let me ask my colleagues if there's anything that anybody wants to bring up. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few staff announcements to make. I want to express my gratitude to my former Chief of Staff and Media Advisor, Chanel Hardy, for her service. We greatly benefited from Chanel's expertise in policy analysis, building effective coalitions, and, of course, the media portfolio. She provided excellent strategic advice on issues such as inmate calling services, Lifeline, the AM revitalization item, all of items that I care about. We will miss her charm, good humor, and straight talk, and congratulate her on her current position. I'd like to welcome back to my office Holly Saar, who's been serving as our interim media advisor. All of you know Holly, who's a current associate chief in the Media Bureau, who always does an outstanding job on any type of basis. I appreciate that. And she is a favorite in the office. Sorry, other two. I am fortunate that she has agreed to help us out once again. And Mr. Chairman, if you allow me to take an opportunity to introduce you to my latest class of interns. Anna Gentry is a proud graduate of my alma mater, the University of South Carolina. Go Gamecocks. She's in her third year at George Mason University. Don't start. Don't start. Wait till next year. George Mason University Law School, and she brings considerable experience on wireless matters, having interned last summer in our Wireless Telecommunications Bureau. She also worked for a year at Sprint. Also, if I could welcome officially Carl Gerner, whose hometown is Saratoga, New York, well north of here. He's quite accustomed to our mere 24 or so inches of snow, and he is still laughing at how we have been reacting to all of this, but be careful. He is in his last semester at the University of Utah Law School and wrote on that law review an article which discussed Section 706 of the Communications Act. He currently also serves as the Law Review's Executive Symposium Editor. He expressed to me that he is grateful to have the opportunity to work on such important issues that we work on every day, and hopes to continue this journey in the communications field. And Taylor Moore hails from Michigan. She's in her third year at Howard University Law School. She appears to not be here, but I will. She'll waive the next meeting. She brings to our office her passion and substantial experience in social justice issues. Last summer, she was a Google Policy Fellow with Public Knowledge, and she also clerked with the American Civil Liberties Union. I would like to welcome them to my office. They hit the ground running, and they will continue to make significant contributions to our office and, of course, to this agency. Thank you very much.
Well, just to prove that Commissioner Pai isn't the only person who can make musical references.
Oh, my goodness.
Okay, generally Saratoga is now represented. You know, the great, immortalized in Guys and Dolls, and the lament that you get off, you get on the train for Niagara, and then get off at Saratoga for the 14th time.
Okay.
And I can sing it for you if you want, but since we're friends, I won't.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rosenworth, do you have anything? Sure you don't want to add to that?
That little history lesson about American musicals? No, I'll pass.
What about singing?
Commissioner Pye? Okay, buddies, over to you now.
I'm going to say, I'm very surprised. I always figured you were more of a young Jeezy fan as opposed to Guys and Dolls.
No. Frank Lesser's my guy.
All right. Fair enough. So our office also has 4 new interns. 2 of them are attending class right now, and 2 of them are doing the responsible thing, which is skipping. They are here, so I'd like to recognize them. First, Brandon Carter. Brandon is a third-year law student at Georgetown. Now, when we hired him, I've got to admit, I had pretty high, you might say, unrealistic expectations, and that is because when I logged on, and if you log on, you'll see this too, to BrandonCarter.com, you will see a really buff guy who promises, and I got to quote this, total transformation workouts, fitness advice, and nutrition coaching, and who offers to, and I quote again, jumpstart your transformation with 30 days of proven workouts from America's favorite celebrity trainer for free, all of which appealed to me. Nothing against this Brandon, but thus far at least, he's been focusing more on the flab in the Code of Federal Regulations than the flab around my waistline. But nonetheless, we are appreciative that he is here. I'm going to enlist Carl, too, since he seems to be a rather intrepid fellow. We got a nice long driveway that you can prove your mettle on. So, like myself, Brandon is the son of rural America, having grown up in a small town with the chairman's indulgence, Michigan. But the recent blizzard reminded him why he moved from the Wolverine State to go to undergrad at Arizona State, where he spent most of his college career poolside. After spending a few years overseas on missions, Brandon decided to settle down here in D.C., where he met his now wife, whom he just married last month. Welcome, Brandon. Second, I'd like to introduce Max Staloff. Max is a second-year law student at Georgetown. He hails from Louisville and has been to the Kentucky Derby 5 times, only as a visitor, however, not as a jockey, as I understand it. In 2014, Max achieved great fame in Kentucky when he became the 5th grade chess champion of the Bluegrass State. That's pretty cool. Wow. Not bad, huh? Like the Chicago Bears quarterback Jay Cutler, he graduated from Vanderbilt, where he studied political science with a focus on Southeast Asian politics. Unlike Jay Cutler, he has not let us down just yet. Max's experience in our nation's capital had an auspicious beginning. When he visited here the first time with his grandparents, they accidentally got lost, ended up near the Jefferson Memorial, and ended up accidentally meeting someone who extended his hand and said, "Hello, I'm President George W. Bush." He complimented Max on his firm handshake, which is more than I can say President Bush said to me when I had the honor of shaking his hand. Now, Max is here for the semester, as is Brandon. We have 2 others who I'll introduce next month, but I'll simply say that it's just yet another reminder that there are people around the country here who are interested in what we do, and we're so grateful that they spend their time laboring in these fields alongside us. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Reilly? We've got a couple new folks in the chairman's office as well. Tony, you want to stand up? Where's Tony? There's Tony. Anthony Jones. Tony is a second-year student at Catholic University, Columbus School of Law, received a degree in business management from St. John's University. He is an FCC alum, having also interned in the Enforcement Bureau, providing analysis on issues involved in that bureau's activities. He also assisted in investigations, some of the investigations that the Bureau has had going on. He spent time on the Hill as a Defense Appropriations Associate with the U.S. House Appropriations Committee, and he's currently the treasurer of the Black Law Students Association. And today is literally day 1 for Tony in our office. So, Tony, we're glad you're here and welcome. Tony's joined by Jamili Kadri, who is a third-year student from Georgetown Law School. She received a degree in political science from Yale. Also a returning vet to the FCC. Also having come out of the Travis LeBlanc School of Agency Service. At the Enforcement Bureau, and she worked there, as a matter of fact, on the EAS issues that we talked about today. And she's currently the Vice President for Professional Development of the Latin American Law Student Association. We're glad you're with us. Today's your first day, too, right? Second day. I just can't count. That's twice as many as I had you give credit for. And then Gabby Whitehead is our third intern, and she is not here today, so we will hold off on embarrassing her until she can be here. But thank you to all of these folks who are giving of their time and talents in the processes here. If there's nothing else from the bench, Madam Secretary, would you tell us what happens next?
The next agenda meeting of the Federal Communications Commission is Thursday, February 18th, 2016.
Thank you very much. Until then, we hope we're plowed out by then, and we stand adjourned. Thank you, ma'am. Are we ready? Okay.
I will get it started here. All right, we're about to start the press conference. If those in the room not attending the press conference could step out to the hallway to continue your conversations, that would be great. Hi, everybody. Chairman Wheeler will start with a few words, then we'll get to your questions.
So how's it feel to be doing this on a full stomach? Huh? I mean, for all of us, it's a nice little twist. Rather than use this opportunity to give my usual recap of what we did today, I'd like to give a preview of next month's meeting. As you all know, today I will circulate a proposal for consideration at next month's meeting to introduce competition and spur innovation in the set-top box marketplace. So let's just review a little bit of the bidding on this. 99% of pay TV customers lease set-top boxes from their cable, satellite, or telco provider. There is no competitive market, and that reality is explicitly contrary to statutory mandate. On average, consumers are paying $231 a year to rent those boxes. Collectively, about $20 billion a year. And by the way, did I mention they have no competitive choice when it comes to that situation? And according to a recent analysis submitted for the record, over the past 20 years, the cost of cable television set-top boxes has risen 185%, while the cost of computers, televisions, and mobile phones has dropped 80%. And I'll share with you, this was the chart that Public Knowledge and Consumer Federation of America appended to their submission. And as you say, one's going up and one's going down. And one is not competitive and one is competitive. You can reach your own conclusions. But consumers drew their conclusion long ago. Immediately after you all started writing about this, I started getting emails, and I just thought I'd share with you a couple of the emails. I appreciate anything you can do to help lower cable bills. As a widow, my income is reduced. I cut down to the lowest tier of programs, even though I could no longer get some favorites. I have purchased the modem router to cut back on the newly increased rate the cable company charged, presumably for broadband is what that reference is to. I had asked if there were a way I could purchase the adapters, the set-top boxes, and was told no. Another email, I just read the article in USA Today about your intentions to open the set-top boxes now required by all cable companies to view their programming. I've always thought this was a consumer ripoff, and I applaud you on your continued push to get this done for consumers. Having to lease these boxes for multiple TVs in your residence with no other options is not right. No other options. Dear Chairman Wheeler, I was just writing to express my support for the proposal to change set-top box rules. It had always boggled my mind how a cable company could design and encrypt their system so that not only did I have to pay a monthly fee for service, but I was also required to pay a monthly fee for equipment to access that service. I can understand paying extra for DVR boxes or other premium features, but having to pay more money to access a service I was already paying for is unbelievable. So the bottom line here is the American people get it. When it comes to set-top boxes, they have no meaningful options. They are literally paying the price for this lack of alternatives. And Americans understand the benefits of competition, competition, competition. When the FCC required phone companies to open their networks to non-Bell phones, what happened? Functionality went up, prices went down. When wireless companies began unlocking phones so that consumers could take advantage of competition, it was the same story again. Competition is as American as apple pie. Congress directed there should be competition in the set-top box marketplace, and today we begin the process to deliver on that congressional commitment. Let the innovators create and let the consumers choose. So with that, I'll be happy to respond to any questions you might have. We're going to start with John.
Thanks. John McKinnon from the Wall Street Journal. Can you respond to the concern that the cable and satellite industries are raising that basically this is going to somehow undermine their contractual rights in general, and that relates to advertising and subscriptions and lots of other things that they cover in their contracts?
Nothing in this changes the programming business practices of cable operators. This is all about whether the standard for set-top boxes should be a closed standard or an open standard. Nothing changes the way cable operators do their tiering, do their pricing, do their bundling, and other kind of contractual relationships they enter into. Sir.
Thanks. So these cable companies, they obviously came out in force against this. What kind of pushback are you expecting, and how quickly do you think this rule can be finalized and go into effect?
Oh, I'm sure that we will have a fulsome debate on it. The rule, the proposal comes out hopefully 18th of next month. We'll go through the formal APA process, and we'll see where that leads us. Dave.
Dave Sheverson with Reuters. You mentioned a couple times that the set-top boxes have gone up 185%, while the other devices have declined substantially. Do you think the cable companies are using the devices to inflate their profits? And can you also respond to this suggestion that this might hurt minority channels or have security concerns? By the cable companies.
Well, there's a bunch of things in there. So, first of all, I think that this is a reflection of the fact there's no choice. So I don't know about anything else, but there's no choice, and so you can have this kind of an increase when there is no competition. Secondly, let's see, you asked about minority channels. It's interesting. Did you see the op-ed that Bob Johnson, the founder of BET, had in The Hill earlier this week, in which he said this was essential for minority programmers? There's been another op-ed by Cliff Franklin, who was a minority video programmer, saying similar things. The National Hispanic Media Coalition has come out in favor of this in order to expand the choice and the opportunities. I understand it was even discussed at the Sundance Film Festival this last weekend among minorities in terms of opening up new opportunity for them. Because, the reality today is if you don't get on cable, how do I find you? And then when you get on cable, you're on channel 137. I forget the other parts of your question. But
No, and just the general issue that this will cost consumers more money. They'll have to have a second device. Just kind of.
This is no second device. So let's just get that real clear, real straight, real early. 6 years ago, in 2010, there was a proposal that there would be a second box solution. It was called Allvid. The cable industry is continually trying to call this Allvid. It is not. It is not requiring a second box. It is about open standards versus closed standards. We need to have standards the same way we have standards developed for cell phones, standards developed for Bluetooth, standards developed for Wi-Fi, instead of the closed standards that exist for cable card, that have kept cable card from being available as to those who might want to have competition.
Sure.
Alex?
Alex Byers with Politico. I'm going to pivot off of
Pivot.
top boxes. Given your experience as a VC previously, and now obviously given your more recent experience as a regulator or someone who sees how new products need to interface with regulators, I'm wondering what you think about Starry, the new service from Aereo founder Chet Kanoja that would sort of seek to turn how some people get their internet on its head. Are there things that sort of company, or I guess I should ask, what can or is the FCC doing to facilitate those kind of competitive offerings?
So, Alex, I don't know whether you ever heard it, but I'm for competition.
I've heard about that, yes.
It's a rumor that's floating around. I saw Chet out at CES, and he told me about what he was planning. And I told him, hey, Chet, I'm for competition.
Sure.
We'll see how this evolves. I know he's in, 38 gig or something like this, and they made some waivers or things like this. We'll look at them.
Well, you guys have the 24 gigahertz NPRM right
Correct.
now. To be blunt, I've understood that NPRM being, we're going to look into this, but I don't how will that, if at all, help support these new things? It's sort of very. We sort of think of that as the
key concept. The interesting concept is in that proceeding is the evolution from analog to digital, and how we have always divvied up the spectrum allocation chart based on analog assumptions. This is the size of a waveform. You can get one signal through that space. Now in the digital world, you can get a bunch through, and that's the kind of decision we have to end up making. I don't know how it ends up affecting what he's talking about.
Okay.
Hi, Amir Nasser, Morning Consult. I wanted to ask, I know that last meeting you guys emphasized that you were going to meet with various telcos about zero rating, and that it was not an investigation, it was just, meeting with them. After EFF came out with a couple reports accusing Binge On as throttling, I was wondering if you guys are looking into actually investigating.
Well, these meetings were actually, some of them were affected by Snowmageddon, and we're right now in the process of gathering information. Period.
Okay. Thank you,
sir.
Brandon Ross, reporter, Bloomberg BNA. So I think as recently as last week, Verizon announced something new with zero rating. And I was curious if the FCC has met, even on background, with all 4 major wireless carriers to discuss their zero rating policies, and if the FCC has any plans, if you have any plans to bring a proposal forward on zero rating, specifically before your chairmanship is over.
We want to meet with them for the purpose of informing ourselves and hear from others as well as to what's going on. Verizon, with their new announcement, obviously is part of that, and beyond that, it would be entirely presumptive. I mean, I think the significant thing to know is this is being handled at the bureau level. I'm not at these meetings. Nobody from the office of the chairman is at these meetings. It's gathering information, and we'll see what happens from there. Hi, Lynn.
Hi, thank you. Regarding the filings for the reverse auction, have the number of reverse auction applications that the SEC received borne out your prediction of a spectrum extravaganza that you made at CES? I'm sure you remember that.
So I didn't make that prediction. You'll recall, Lynn, I actually used that statement after the window had closed. The reality of those applications is that they have been yet to be reviewed, and we have a team of people working on that, and I'm sure they'll be working back and forth with the broadcasters. The broadcasters have an opportunity, up until the 29th of March, which happens to be 61 days from today, for those of you keeping score, to say, I changed my mind, I don't want to do anything. And so, we're just watching how that process develops. David.
As tempted as I am to ask you to do more of the Adelaide part from Guys and Dolls, I instead have a follow-up on the...
I just want to tell you, so here's the story. I was thinking about this one. Thank you for giving me the cue.
Someone has to do it.
And I'm not going to sing it. But Adelaide is a great part. Faith Prince was fabulous when she did it. My wife and I actually were in London over the holidays and watched a British production of Guys and Dolls. And you kind of go, it's not American production. Nobody does musical theater like us. We've probably seen Guys and Dolls 5 or 6 times. It was the finest production of Guys and Dolls that we've ever seen. And the proof of that pudding is that Nicely Nicely, who is a part of Sky Masterson's gang, Nicely Nicely, the only thin Nicely Nicely I've ever seen, was played. Thanks, Gigi. Was played by the understudy. Okay, and you kind of go, you get the program, and the thing falls out, and you go, oh my golly, I got the understudy, for Nicely Nicely, no less. But as you know, in the middle of the second act, he's got this huge number, Sit Down, You're Rocking the Boat. And the understudy stopped the show.
Well, that's when you know you've got a winner.
That's when you know you're sitting here. We're sitting here watching a great show. Excuse me, and that's your one question without the one. I'm sorry, David. Thanks for giving me the chance to talk about it, because it was just fabulous. It was just incredible.
No, of course. I'm curious. Some have suggested, I believe Commissioner Rosenworcel did, that perhaps the Commission could release aggregate data on the number of reverse auction applications. And I'm wondering what you think of that, and if you don't think it's a good idea, why not? So it's the answer
that I gave Lynn. I mean, it's aggregate of nothing right now, because they're unreviewed, and they still have the ability to change their minds. So it's, which is why I tried to use the word extravaganza, which is to say, hey, yeah, there was a real show up.
But clearly other people think this is not, it wouldn't be an aggregate of nothing. So I guess I'm curious kind of what the justification is. I think it would be an
aggregate of nothing.
Okay.
So,
Brian.
How soon can we expect you and Matthew Berry to do a 2-man show?
Look at that. Whenever he wants to, if he'll sing, I'll dance, or whatever the routine is.
I wanted to ask, going back to
You didn't hear about Commissioner Pai and I at the Christmas party, did you? We did a duet at the Christmas
go
party.
on.
We did a duet at the Christmas party. But go ahead, yes.
Yeah, what was the number?
I actually forget. It was one of those spur of the moment things, you might say. Okay, Brian, I'm sorry. Let's substance, yes.
On the set-top box issue, what gives you the confidence that the cable industry isn't going to use the standard-setting process to disadvantage competitive entrants?
Because the standard-setting process, if you have an open standard-setting process, as I say, it's worked for cell phones, it's worked for Wi-Fi, it's worked for Bluetooth, it's worked for routers, it's worked for, name it. If you have an open process, it becomes self-regulatory, if you will, to make sure that it's participatory. And one of the things is that, we're going to say, yeah, it has to be an open process. It can't be this closed process.
David.
Hi there, Chairman David Hatch, Policy and Regulatory Report.
Hello, David.
Yesterday, Media General and Nexstar on their conference call, they said that the FCC won't allow broadcast mergers to close while the incentive auction is underway. And my question is, would you consider waiving that restriction for this deal and any others held up by the auction?
Oh, I think that the problem is that it's going to take a lot longer for this just to get through the normal process than the auction would take. I mean, it's an interesting academic point, but probably irrelevant.
But if a deal were potentially held up by the auction, would you consider at least a waiver, at least for an individual transaction?
If it potentially rains tomorrow and all of the snow floods 12th Street, would I consider closing the FCC? It's the same kind of a hypothetical. What I'm saying is I think the facts of the matter are that, they just worked out the situation in the last day or two. It will be a process through that. We will go through the normal process here. We're not going to just sit on our hands while there's an auction going on, and that process naturally takes time. It'll probably be at the end of the auction.
Could I just ask, when do you anticipate that the incentive auction could potentially end? What's the time frame that we're looking at?
When there are no more bidders.
Are we talking weeks, months?
When there are no more bidders.
But do you have any sense of what the time frame could
David,
be?
I think it'll end when there are no more bidders. This is this is a market that we're running. Monty.
Monty Taylor, Com Daily. I actually went to every DSTAC meeting, sadly, and there was a lot of concern. There was a lot of concern expressed by people on the cable MVPD side that a lot of what's in the proposal that ended up being proposed is not technically feasible right now. There were some concerns about IP delivery and that a lot of it would, they use the term vaporware sometimes to describe some of those proposals. Is what you guys are proposing technically feasible right now?
Yes, and let's go back again in history. Let's go back to the Allvid proposal. Everybody wants to keep characterizing this as Allvid, which it is not. Allvid was in 2010. It was about 2011 that smart TVs became mainstream. And what's in a smart TV? It's software, sometimes hardware and software, that performs a set-top box-like function, providing copyright protection, link security, and various rights authorization. And I think that demonstrates the fact that it is possible to do those kind of things other than via the closed standard administered by the cable industry of cable card.
Great.
Thank you, everybody. No, I'm not going to say.
I want you to be actor.
I can't do that either, I assure you.
Will's going to come up and lead the Bureau press conferences if you have questions for staff.
Do you guys have questions for the Media Bureau regarding the... Okay. Thanks. Anybody down this end first, or Monty?
The commissioners mentioned some waiver process for, I thought it was just smaller cable, but maybe it was smaller broadcasters too. Can you guys talk about that? I don't think that was in the fact sheet.
Right. We set up size standards for when entities have to come into compliance with the rules, but any entity that has economic or technical problems with complying with the rules can file a request for a waiver.
Any entity?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So the requirements for political ad filings, do they apply? Is it effective immediately for the big operators, or when does that go into effect? Is it before the election in November?
It will go into effect 30 days after we announce that we have OMB approval.
Any other questions on this? There's a line in the fact sheet that says that only existing filings or filing, you don't have to upload existing filings. Can you just explain that? Does that mean they only have to upload new ones, or?
That in that 30-day date that I mentioned, that's when they start uploading new material in the file, and the larger entities have 6 months to upload what's already in the file.
Okay. Going back forever.
Well, whatever they have in the file now, they don't have to keep things in the file forever.
Gotcha.
So they do have to retroactively update everything that they have on file with the commission right now?
I'm sorry? Not except for existing political files.
Except
Things
political.
other than the political file, they'll have to upload in 6 months.
Okay. And then will the FCC upload whatever political files it already has? Or is that only for the broadcasters, or only for the cable and satellite radio?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
So the FCC is going to upload some of the files you guys have on record now, right? But not including the political files?
Right, that would not include the political
Okay.
files because those aren't kept on file with us. It's only things that are filed with us that we would take the step of putting that up there for them.
Okay. And do you know how long before you usually get OMB approval?
It's hard to predict when that's going to be. We're hoping that the rules will go into effect for the larger providers in 3 to 6 months.
Thank you.
Anything else on this item?
Just one thing on the retroactive political filings. When do they have 6 months to do that?
That's never for anyone, right? None of the entities have to upload currently existing political file. It's just a matter of whenever their date to start coming into compliance kicks in, they have to start uploading new political file records.
So the political files is just from that point on?
Correct.
Anybody else on this? All right, thank you. Does anyone have any questions on the emergency alert system? Okay. We have folks from the Homeland Security Bureau coming up. Monty?
Hi, Monty from Com Daily. The fact sheet says that it's going to allow states to conduct tests using live codes. And I was under the impression that was already allowed, and that Alaska did that recently, didn't they?
Yes, they're able to do that with FEMA, and they're doing that regionally. We haven't, though, structured the system so that states can easily incorporate that and communities can easily incorporate their technical tests into operational exercises. So we really believe that the rules that we're proposing and the dialogue that we're wanting to stimulate with this will improve the community-based exercise of alerting and marry that up with the technical tests that have gone on in the past. And Greg, do you want to add any additional pieces?
Yeah, just for something very short. You're right, and Alaska has been one of our models, but that was for per waiver, and it was a very good model to do exactly what Admiral Simpson said, to integrate it into public safety exercises, community-based exercises. So rather than having to go through this waiver one-off process, we're integrating it into the rules so it can become available and readily usable by all participants.
Gotcha. Any other questions on this item?
I want to let you know that we won't get it out today with the late start, but we will get it out tomorrow, I hope. Right? Yeah, okay, we will.
Thanks. Folks have questions on the broadband progress report? Okay. Come on up.
Maxwell. You got a big team. Across Bureau. Alex?
Commissioner Pai mentioned something about 10 more million Americans not being served by broadband now than at the beginning of the Obama administration. And I think, based on the footnote I saw in his statement, he's got to be calculating that based on the definition of broadband in 2009. And so I'm wondering, do you, just by virtue of sort of this like broad comparison of how many people have broadband, how many people have a certain speed of internet now than they did at the beginning of the Obama administration, do you guys have that kind of data? I presume it was 4 megabits down in 2009. I didn't know if that is information that was collected as part of the report because I haven't seen the full report yet.
We have lots of data in this report,
Sure.
as the 2009 report. As to any other point of that, I don't comment on any commissioner's statements.
Right. Sorry, I
I'll
didn't
let them.
I'm not trying to
speak to it.
Start a war between the two. But I'm asking a specific question. Do you know how many Americans currently have 4 megabits down or better right now?
Yes, that is in the report.
Okay.
We'll have, rather than ad-lib it, our chief data officer is right over there, but it'll be out.
But I can find
we
that
hope
somewhere.
tomorrow.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
Exactly.
Yep.
Any other questions on this item? Brendan?
So there were no specific recommendations made in this report, right?
The report discusses ongoing efforts the Commission is taking to advance broadband deployment and the goals of 706. It's not making a further specific recommendation.
Thank you.
Regarding fixed satellite service, you said that there are differences, but you're not really looking at them because there's not fast enough satellite service to qualify for broadband anyway. Does it in any way tee up further inquiry into that issue, or are you just tabling that entirely until it does eventually meet whatever the definition is?
Right. Well, it notes that, as you state, Lynn, that the data we have, the 477 data, doesn't show any satellite broadband provider hitting 25.3, which is the benchmark we apply to satellite here, and so thus there's no need to consider other factors that might be relevant to determining if satellite broadband meets the definition of advanced telecommunications capabilities. So essentially what you said is correct. Just wanted to state
You don't want to use the word
for you.
tabling, that's what you're doing. Okay, thank you. Yes.
Anybody else on this item? Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
I think Commissioners Pai and O'Reilly are here. Thanks.
Hello, hello.
Who wants to start?
Monty, do you want to start on the...
Yeah, I do. We just heard a lot about the proposal for the set-top box. Do you guys think that you'll be supporting that? Just at the NPRM level?
We haven't seen any paper, so I'm not going to comment on what the vote line will be when I don't even know what the proposal is.
But we have had, noise about this for a long time, and we've had, what Allvid was and this whole movement. I mean, in general, is that something you guys are open to, or?
I need to look at the document. So there's been a lot of, you all have been reporting about it in the last couple of days on what's in it, or at least getting off your briefing. I don't mean to be complaining or griping, as some people have suggested, about not being access to certain documents. But I look forward to reading it. I read every item that I vote on, so I'm looking forward to seeing what's in it.
Okay, nice. No, thank you. Thank you. David?
For starters, I was wondering if either of you have any sense as to how long that the incentive auction could take. Are we talking weeks, months, how long? What is there? If there's a range, what would it be?
I agree 100%, as always, with the chairman.
I'll give you my, I have no great idea. I tend to think it's going to be months, but I have, it depends on a lot of different factors. I have no information on the number of broadcasters that were part of the previous question that was asked earlier, so I don't have a great deal of basis to make that point.
And as a quick follow-up, do you share the chairman's view that it's a moot point that the incentive auction could potentially hold up the Nexstar Media General deal and other broadcast-related transactions? Or do you think that there's a real possibility of that, and if so, would you support any waivers?
So I never comment about pending or potential mergers in any aspect, but I'll just say, I'll see when what's put before us in terms of the timing and have to consider at that time.
Brian?
Give me a second.
Thank you. I'm curious, last time we spoke, you had literally just received notice of these meetings between companies who were involved in zero rating and the commission. Neither of you were particularly pleased with that development. Since then, have you gained any more information about the process they're going, and do you still feel the same way, or have you kind of adjusted based on new information? Not just with the meeting, but with this general examination of the practice.
No, my overall position remains the same, that this is an enterprise that is wholly unnecessary, especially when the agency, a month previous to announcing those investigations, had blessed one particular offering as, quote, highly competitive and highly innovative. And so, whatever might be happening in these meetings, my office is not privy to them, but I think the entire enterprise is just unnecessary.
My position hasn't changed. I think this is troubling, the direction based on the two different press conferences the chairman gave. This is exactly what we predicted and talked about in the net neutrality item in regards to the Mother May I situation and needing the commission to bless it in some capacity. In terms of following up on, we are trying to gather as much information from the inquisitors that the bureaus are trying to get from the companies. So we're trying to understand what their process is and understand where they plan to go and what is their scope, and trying to understand all of those things. I understand the chairman makes the point that none of his staff participated, but we do all know that the bureaus are at his discretion, because otherwise I would get a lot more information.
Can I ask you guys to comment on the chairman's proposal about set-top boxes, specifically regarding the proposal to have this be done through an open standard setting process?
My answer to that is going to be the same as it was to Monty, that I'm not going to comment on a proposal that I haven't seen, and so I can't give you anything more than that.
I don't have any more information I haven't read it to know what it contains, and I only heard what you heard in terms of the standard setting. Generally, standard setting is done by the private sector, and I support that. Have been concerned about the commission getting involved in standard setting process. You can see statements I made on LTE and some other things along those lines.
Well, I'm going to take one little half step back and see if I can get you all to maybe comment on it. In thinking about set-top boxes, do you think that's the relevant market, given that some don't even have an MVPD anymore, they're just cobbling together OTT and broadcast, and some are using a device like Apple TV or Amazon Fire, Roku, all kinds of things to sort of look for content online to what they're going to watch. So it's kind of a softball for you, but maybe that'll get you all to actually say something substantive. There it is.
I will say this. My wife purchased Amazon Fire, and I use it and enjoy it. It doesn't require a set-top box. I actually have been exploring this issue for an awful long time, and not talking about this current items, which I haven't read. But I am coming of the mind that I'm not sure that we need set-top boxes anymore. I think they're actually a hindrance, and so I'm going to have to delve into this closer. But I wonder if we haven't got to the point that we should have no set-top boxes.
And I'll simply say that there's been a lot of technological change since the Section 629 regime was instituted a couple of decades ago. What the implications of that are for the FCC's regulatory framework is something that I'll make a decision upon once we see what the chairman's proposal is.
Brandon Ross, Bloomberg BNA. Going back to the broadband progress report, last year, as you guys well know, a lot of people said the FCC used that report to inform their net neutrality decision. Do you have? I know you supported this report, and Commissioner Riley, you dissented from this report. Do you guys have any concern that this commission might use this report to inform a decision this year, or that a future commission might take this report and do something with it that maybe you guys feel is inappropriate or good?
I guess the way I would answer it is this. This report is wholly irrelevant to whatever policy preferences the Commission might have at any given point in time. It's obviously helpful for them to be able to exploit whatever legal authority they have or they think they have in order to achieve a preordained policy result. But net neutrality certainly didn't depend on an objective, sober analysis of the broadband marketplace. It was simply a political imperative that was delivered by political actors. And so I tend to think this report is going to be stuffed on a shelf somewhere and noted for the historical files, but ultimately the Commission is going to do whatever it's going to do, regardless of the facts and the law.
I've said as much. I said as much last year. I do not believe Section 706 provides the authority the Commission believes it has. But the extent that they believe it does, they have tried to preserve its authority and will use it at some point. And it has bled into a number of different items this year, including items that I've had to fight to get the provisions out. So I anticipate they will use this reference for some goal that I will disagree with, I imagine.
And I would add, if I could, and this follows up on Commissioner O'Reilly's previous experience when on the Hill, when the Telecom Act of '96 was negotiated. The great irony of this entire enterprise is Section 706 is a deregulatory provision. I mean, if the Commission makes a negative finding, then what it's supposed to do is reduce regulatory barriers to infrastructure investment to make sure that broadband or advanced telecommunications capabilities are deployed everywhere. And so the notion that the agency is now using 706 as an affirmative regulatory cudgel to beat the private sector into submission and restructure the marketplace however it sees fit is, I mean, I wasn't there like the Commissioner, but I think it's quite ironic and ultimately it disserves American consumers.
So, as you pointed out, you guys don't have to agree on everything, but I'm trying, still on the broadband progress report, trying to sort of, I'm still a little confused about sort of the two statements that you guys made. It seemed, Commissioner O'Reilly, like you were saying, the data shows that we actually have been improving. You didn't like sort of the fundamental conclusion and what that sort of alludes to what Brendan was talking about. And Commissioner Pai, you were saying that a lot of the initiatives that the administration has put forth over the last 7.5 years or so have been failures. So that seems to be a question of fact. Have we been, even if it's not, regardless of sort of like the top line conclusion of this report, this question of have we been doing better at getting broadband to people, that seems like a factual question that it seems like you guys were on different sides of. Is that, can we disagree on the facts there, or help me square that if possible?
I think that the data shows that things are getting better, at least in my opinion. Mm-hmm. I disagree with a number of components to the report, including the 25.3. I disagree with its drafting of last year and creating 25.3. And you look at one of the prongs was, that we would have penetration of 4K television everywhere. It's not. It's under 10%. So I mean, it is. So I think the facts to get us to this false number are wrong. So we shouldn't have created this false number. In terms of broadband being deployed, I think it's a tremendously successful story in some places, and there's definitely room for improvement in areas. And I'm working hard on some of those fronts.
Rural, yeah.
Certainly.
Mm-hmm.
The bottom line for me is pretty simple. The administration's policies have failed. After 7 years, after all this money spent, after all these actions taken, after all these actions not taken, if at the end of that we are still not able to say that broadband is being deployed on a reasonable and timely basis to all Americans, then that's an indictment of the FCC, that's an indictment of the administration. So just take the money spent, for example. When I went through my litany, it's staggering when you look at the billions of dollars that have been deployed, all with glowing press releases at the time. They were all talking about closing the digital divide. If after spending $10 billion on Lifeline, billions more on Connect America Fund, billions more on that on the High Cost Fund, yet billions more on BTOP, I mean, if after all that we still have this rural-urban divide, well, who's responsible for that? Look at what the agency has done, for example. forget not just net neutrality, but on some of the other decisions it's made that have made it harder for the private sector companies to make the multi-billion-dollar investment decision to deploy. Some of the decisions that is consciously not made, the Connect America Fund, decisions that have been put off for a year, on the rate of return fund and not fulfilling its commitment to put a plan on the table by the end of the year. There's so many other things we could be doing that we've not, streamlining wireless infrastructure, et cetera. So I think
and not to make you sort of, you've obviously talked about this a lot, and you've said that sort of if there was one thing, I think you said at the MMTC summit, if there was one thing you could tell a presidential candidate, it would be accelerate broadband deployment.
Absolutely.
And not to make you sort of choose between your children here, but is there one thing that either if the FCC could do one thing to improve broadband deployment, is there an answer to that, or the number one thing that is hurting the deployment, whether it's net neutrality or you talked about the slow phase out of copper, or putting more money into rural since that's where the problem is? Like, what would it be?
I can't give you just one answer, but all I can tell you is that based on the travels I've had, especially some of the travels I had last fall, everywhere from the bayou of Louisiana to the plains of North Dakota, the consistent answer is that we don't get the same broadband options and competition that you guys enjoy in the big cities. And the reasons for that are multifold, that we don't, instead of focusing...
Not just one thing.
No, absolutely. We've been distracted down the rabbit holes of things like net neutrality, when instead what Americans actually want is more competition. So that means everything from 5 gigahertz spectrum to wireless infrastructure being sited on federal lands, or a rate of return plan, or there's so many pieces to the puzzle. Speaking for myself, I don't know if I assume the commissioner would agree. Our goal is to just promote as much competition using as many technologies as possible. So there's no magic bullet, in my view, that the FCC should be trying to shoot.
I'll say beyond bad policy decisions that the commission has made, and I'll give you two. I'm sorry you wanted one, but I'll give you two. One is definitely steps we have to make on CAF, and that includes the RAF, which we have. We talk about certain disagreements on where we are in regarding to rate of return. We are nowhere on the RAF. So there's a host of decisions that need to be made. CAF Phase 2 post-row for auction. So CAF is definitely one of them. And the second is wireless infrastructure. We have to move forward to remove barriers that state and localities have enacted because they want the wireless broadband, but then there are aesthetic concerns regarding the towers that come with it. And you can't have both. And so we acknowledge what the benefits of broadband are, and we have to move forward and use our authority that Congress has given us, that the courts have upheld, to push forward and overturn a number of those state and locality decisions. And that means also moving forward to expand that authority, which I think is consistent with the statute that I worked on.
I know you want to speak to this proposal on set-top boxes because you haven't seen it yet, but can you speak generally to this issue that the chairman is raising about a lack of competition and says that prices are up 185%? I mean, do you agree generally that the set-top box market is in need of competition, or that the prices are too high?
I don't have a lot to add. I saw the same chart you did. We have a bunch of economists. I didn't know we needed a public knowledge chart, but so be it. I want to take a little closer look at that, but I'm still asking the most basic question. I think I mentioned to Lynn's question, whether we even need set-top boxes. So I'm not sure that the right question is, do we get cheaper set-top boxes, or where they're just where they're sold, which at retail establishments, but is it a question of should we even have them, or they're a necessary component to the offering of service?
No, I would simply add that it's premature to reach a decision, but I will say that I think regardless of what one's position on the ultimate issue is, as I pointed out in an op-ed that I did with Congressman Bob Latta maybe 2 years ago, I think no one would disagree with the notion that the government's attempts to spur competition in this area have not been as fruitful as was originally forecast back in 1992. John Salas.
I have a TPA question. Earlier this month, about 6.5, 7 years after a request for a declaratory ruling was filed on this, the FCC did come to a finding that bulk fax senders still have a distinct liability from mass text senders, where the faxers are seen more as conduits, the text messengers, they're still in that totality of the circumstances liability test. Struck me, I think that request, as I said, was filed, I think it was August 2009. Was wondering if either of you had any comment on just that amount of time waiting for a response for a declaratory ruling, and also on the ruling itself.
couple things. I thought you said TPA, so I was thinking Trade Promotion Authority.
Sorry,
you mean
TCPA.
TCPA?
Yeah,
okay,
sorry
so
about that.
let's start the most basic. I don't believe any decision should take that long at the commission. I believe we should make decisions in a more timely manner. The Congress is considering legislation to put time limits on some of those decisions. I'm comfortable making decisions. Not everyone's going to agree with what I decide, but I think we should, nothing should wait that long. We had inmate calling sitting for many years. I don't believe it should have taken that long. I certainly didn't agree with the outcome, but we think we should make decisions. So that's the process part. And I've had a lot of problems with the process, which people have highlighted. The second is the substantive one, and I think that the Commission has been outside the bounds of the law itself. I've tried to work with them on and work at length on the facts piece, and we got to somewhat a place where we were grandfathering a number of pieces and allowed some folks to take an exemption if they applied in a certain window that we made available. On the texting and the calls, we have a huge disagreement both in the process and the substance. You can see my dissent in Commissioner Pai's as well. That's being challenged in the court process. I think we've stepped outside the bounds of the law, and hopefully the courts will indicate that it's problematic, and we'll either need to fix it or we'll strike it down. We can return to congressional intent.
I would agree with what Commissioner O'Reilly said in terms of process and substance. I would simply add that that kind of delay is part of the reason why in my first speech as a commissioner I urged the Commission to make more active use of Section 7 of the Communications Act, which is essentially a dead letter at this point. But that section, as you may know, requires the Commission to rule within 1 year on an application for a new product and service. Now, that's obviously not necessarily what is involved in this application, but I think the spirit of it is something that the agency should embrace. Nobody should have to sit around waiting for 7 years to get a declaration on what the law is or what service is going to be permitted under the Communications Act.
Commissioner O'Reilly, you were really passionate about the evils of advisory committees. Does the DSTAC fall under that sort of heading there? Could it?
Couple points. I have written on this in one of my blogs. I wrote a blog about this. I know you read them well. But actually, the DSTAC is a statutory one. It doesn't provide any authority to commissioners. It was, the Congress made a decision, so I let that process play out as it's supposed to. So there is a congressional directive, very specific. What I have difficulty is some of the other advisory committees that we've done on an ad hoc basis. We've used those and we can go through the litany of problems I've had. So I think the DSTAC's a little different since it's mandated by Congress.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.